Many people around the world are still struggling to meet the most basic human essentials. Even though the number of people living in extreme poverty has dropped from 1.9 billion in 1990 to 836 million in 2015, poverty in all its forms remains one of the greatest challenges facing humanity. Globally, many lack access to adequate food, clean drinking water, and sanitation. More than 800 million people are still living on less than $1.25 a day. While there has been rapid economic growth in countries such as China and India that has lifted millions out of poverty, the progress has been uneven. Women are immensely affected. They are more likely to live in poverty due to unequal access to paid work, education, and property. The inability of countries to recover from natural disasters that have forced them to abandon their homes as well as destroyed their crops is intertwined with reduction of poverty. The reoccurrence of countries that have built up and strengthened their agricultural industry for the sake of their economy are left unable to develop further due to the natural disasters that struck their region. This lack of resilience can destroy their economy. Families in nations that are part of South Asia as well as East Africa are unable to find homes or adequate support once they're forced to move due to the extreme natural disasters that occur around them. This parallels onto their economy, which loses billions of US dollars due to the inadequate support provided for families impacted by these disasters. Earthquakes, floods, typhoons, and hurricanes are all examples of natural disasters. What classifies them as disasters specifically is their fatal and serious impact on families and citizens in a region that forces them to abandon their homes and, in most areas, their agricultural process as well. These disasters inflict serious damage that not only impact families but in many cases their economy as well. As previously mentioned, there are many nations that have built up their economy using agriculture as their foundation, and once that's destroyed through these tragedies, it'll weaken their economy and force even harsher circumstances on families. Natural disasters have serious impact on the economy. For example, they can inflict permanent damage on firms. They can destroy their buildings and equipment, as well as human capital. These impacts may sometimes be fatal to the firms and result in them being forced to close down. Research shows that groups with less power, and in other words, living in poverty, suffer more injuries and are more likely to lose their lives because of natural disasters and their lack of resilience towards it. Reports on heat waves, for example, in the Midwest of the United States showed the majority of those who died were of low income. Authors of the World Bank and Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery reports relate that people who did not have a working air conditioner, access to an air-conditioned lobby, or an air-conditioned place to visit were 20 to 30% more likely to die than people with access to air conditioning. From an economic perspective, disasters are known to have a greater effect on those suffering poverty around the world. As explained in the introduction of the World Bank and Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery report, economic losses from natural disasters totaled $92 billion in 2015, and average annual losses have been estimated at more than $300 billion a year. Although these numbers are useful, they provide information on the trends and costs of disasters. They fail to detail how disasters affect people's well-being. Obviously, $1 in losses does not mean the same thing to a rich person and a poor person, and the severity of a $92 billion loss depends on who experiences it. The same loss affects poor and marginalized people far more because their livelihoods depend on fewer assets. Their consumption is closer to subsistence levels. They cannot rely on savings to smooth the impacts. Their health and education are at greater risk, and they may need more time to recover and reconstruct. By focusing on aggregate losses, the traditional approach examines how disasters affect By focusing on aggregate losses, the traditional approach examines how disasters affect people wealthy enough to have wealth to lose and so does not take into account most poor people. The report analyzes the greater vulnerability of those in poverty. Along with this, the authors point out that those in poverty around the world are more likely to have built their lives focused on their homes and livestock, both which, as previously mentioned, are more likely to be damaged or lost in an occurrence of these natural disasters.